Ladies and gentlemen, sports fans alike, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago, one of the couple, two, three best podcasts around. So sit back, grab yourself a cold one and a Polish sausage, park your keister in the French room, and listen to Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago.
In Chicago, you know that all sports rock. The Bears, Hawks, Bulls, Cubs and Sox. Pick your favorite, you can choose, as long as the Packers lose. For everything you need to know, it's Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. This is your host, Sean. On today's episode, we have Duncan Keith doing his best Jason Voorhees imitation. Major League Baseball opening day is upon us, and the Bulls are all but out of the playoffs. All of this and more on this episode of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. But first, as always, we'd like to mention our sponsor, the Rockford Ice Hogs. And just as an FYI, my family and I went to the game last night, and my daughter is wearing her brand new Rockford Ice Hogs sweatshirt she got from the store today. She's running around, she's 18 months old, looks adorable in it. Anyway, if you're not familiar with the Rockford Ice Hogs, they're the AHL minor league team of the Chicago Blackhawks. What does that mean? That means you get to see the stars of tomorrow, today, at affordable, family-friendly prices. Tickets starting at just $7, and there are only 2 home games left before the playoffs start. And your Rockford Ice Hogs will be in the playoffs. They only need 3 more points to secure a berth, and they have 7 games left, but only 2 are at home. Make sure you check them out. They're April 15th against the Grand Rapids Griffins, which is the Red Wings minor league team. They're 1 spot ahead of them in the standings. Then there's the Milwaukee Admirals. Check them out. Only 90 minutes from the city limits, and probably even less than that, is we left from our house and made it at hour 15. Tickets starting at just $7. Fun for the whole family. Check them out at icehogs.com. So where do we start? We've pretty much put the Bears on the back burner a little bit, and we are so close to the NFL draft. We are so close. So I think we're going to start with the Chicago Bears, move over to the Blackhawks, touch on the Bulls a little bit, and then finish the show on baseball. We're going to talk a little bit of baseball because opening day is upon us, and I want to talk a little bit about it because we've put it on so little emphasis on it because, in my opinion, spring training is so overrated. It's just to get guys in shape, get arms loosened up, to finalize roster spots, etc., etc. I'm not really concerned about who hit what, who won what game, what the standings were, blah, blah, blah. I don't care. I really don't care. It doesn't mean anything to me. It's all about when the season starts. But we'll talk about that more in a little bit. First, I would like to talk about the Bears. The Bears. Where do we go? Chicago Bears have made some interesting and I think really calculated moves this offseason. A lot of people were hoping the Bears would go out and spend huge money to buy these huge big free agents like Von Miller, which wasn't going to happen because if you sign Von Miller away, he was a franchise tag. You'd be giving up several first-round draft picks and paying him a boatload of cash, which is just not feasible. The Bears' philosophy was they were going to spend money because they still have money to spend. They were going to spend it in a smart way. They were going to pick low-cost veterans on shorter prove-it deals and spend money. If they're going to spend multi-years or a lot of money on a player, it's going to be somebody that's either just entering his prime or B, just about to enter his prime, that they see there's a lot of potential there. That way they're locking up guys to team-friendly contracts what that does is it allows more flexibility of the cap room. So you couldn't go out and sign a big name free agent, but it also doesn't put you in a bind with huge salaries of guys that are going to be too old to play anymore. That's the reality of it, is you want a guy that's going to be productive that entire contract. You want to be able to get the entire contract out of a player rather than have to cut him, because the way that you set up your signing bonuses, you can prorate them through the life of the contract. If you cut a player early, you're having to eat whatever signing bonus is left over that year or over this year and the next year, if you designate them as a post-June 1st cut. So it's advantageous in a lot of ways to be able to keep a guy throughout his entire contract. So your goal is to make smart moves where a guy, if you sign him to a 4-year deal, that he's going to be good for 4 years, and you can maintain him throughout there. And the smarter cap decisions you make, the smarter free agent moves you make, that makes your cap hit better, because you don't have to re-sign somebody else to replace that player. So if you go out and sign a cornerback for $5 million a year and for 4 years, and he plays those 4 years and does well for you, it's better than paying him $5 million a year and then having to go out, cut him, pay the signing bonus prorated, and then have to come in and sign another player to replace him. It's just, you want to make sure you're hitting on your free agents. And what the Bears doing is smart, is because they're not just going out willy-nilly signing any free agent. They're really doing their due diligence. They're signing a lot of guys that are have some sort of history with the coaching staff, with the general manager staff, someone where they feel comfortable with this player, where they know what they're getting, not just what they did for another team, but what they think they'll do for the Bears, and how they'll be in the locker room, how they'll respond to this coaching staff, how they'll respond to the system that the Bears run. They want to know all those things, because just think about players that have gone on, that done really good things with a team and then signed a big contract with another team and just been a big flop, because NFL isn't always about just being able to play. It's finding the right fit for you. Is a lot of the effort. Is you need to find a team that the scheme they run fits you. If you are a zone corner and that's how you specialize, you don't want to go to a press man team with a single high run the single high safety, because you're going to get put on an island that you're not going to be able to necessarily do. Whereas you might thrive in where you have only a certain space that you have to cover. You want to make sure that you fit with the system that you're going to run. And the Bears, when they sign players, want to make sure that that player is going to transition well to them. So the Bears have made a bunch of moves that I think are pretty smart. They signed Jaquiz Rodgers. They let Matt Forte go. They knew that they needed another running back at least. They still have Sonoris Perry on the roster, but they signed Jaquiz Rodgers to another 1-year deal. That's a good in several ways. One, they're very familiar with Jaquiz Rodgers. He was injured last year, so he didn't get any more miles on his body, and they know and they're familiar with him because from him being in camp, they're familiar with him and his personality. He's familiar with the system that they're going to run, and they're confident in him. And it's a low cost, like a low risk, high reward type deal. So if you come in and bring Jaquiz Rodgers as your number 3 running back, you feel very confident. However, if you end up drafting somebody, or say that C.J. Anderson situation would have played out, is you could have signed a C.J. Anderson, cut Jaquiz Rodgers right there, and been perfectly fine within your cap space to do that. So if they see somebody like Ezekiel Elliott falls to the Bears in the second round, they're like, oh, that's really good value for Ezekiel Elliott. They draft Ezekiel Elliott, and they go, well, with Ezekiel Elliott, Kadeem Carey, and Jeremy Langford, we don't need Jaquiz Rodgers. So we can move on from him, and you're not bound to him by this contract. So very smart move is you're comfortable with him. If you need to move on from him, you can. Very comfortable. Very good move. Tracy Porter signed to a 3-year deal. You signed him last year to a 1-year prove-it deal. You gave him right around league veteran minimum and said, hey, you've been in the league. You didn't get a big money deal. Why don't you play for 1 year, see what you can do, show us on the field? And he went out there and showed it. He earned his contract. Bears rewarded him with another 3-year deal. Again, he's very familiar with the system. He performed at a high level in the system. They know who he is as a person. They know who he is as a player. He fits in well with the system. Good fit. Good signing. The Bears agreed to terms with Jarrell Freeman. Again, it was a 3-year contract, so it is not earth-shattering. But he was a guy that they felt very comfortable with the style of play he was. They waited on him. It was for a player that's put up the numbers and done what he's done in the league. It's a very team-friendly contract. You brought back Mark Mariani on a 1-year deal. Again, this is kind of like the Jaquiz Rogers situation. If you need him to return punts, or you need him to be 4th or 5th wide receiver or 6th wide receiver, you've got that option. But if everybody comes in super healthy, Kevin White looks really good, Alshon Jeffrey looks good, Eddie Royal looks good, and Marquise Wilson looks good, and then you end up drafting a wide receiver, and then you can move on from Mark Mariani. You don't need him. So it's a flexibility signing. Same with Mitch Unrein. They brought in Akeem Hicks because he came from a solid program. He's entering into his prime right now. He's shown flashes of being really good. He's a really coveted guy. They feel like he's going to fit well in the system. He's been in a great locker room in that Patriots organization. It's a good pick. Zach Miller, again, he's another guy that they rewarded for how he played. Sam Acho, they signed him to another 1-year deal. They felt that this is going to be like a Jaquiz Rogers, Mark Mariani is. Sam Acho is a body that can play outside linebacker, his experience doing it, played in this system, had some good games, had some bad games, can play special teams. If they draft somebody and they don't need his spot anymore, they can move on. The interesting ones now are coming up is they clearly signed Bobby Massey at right tackle, and they said they plan on him being the right tackle, and they plan on moving Kyle Long back to his natural spot of right guard. But then the Bears go and sign Manny Ramirez to a 1-year deal, who's a veteran guard, and they signed Ted Larson, another veteran guard, to a 1-year deal. My interest peaked at this is, what's the purpose if you feel like Matt Slauson is a borderline Pro Bowl level guard, Kyle Long is a Pro Bowl level guard, is you bring in 2 other guards. I wonder what's the situation there. And if you look a little further, is you've got Ramirez and Larson, who do have experience playing center. So are one of them going to compete with Hronis Grasu to be the starting center? It kind of light a fire under him and say, hey, listen, you stepped in and you are starting center due to injury, then you had some bumps in the road but showed some flashes. But we need a big step up this year. Is that the situation? Or is the situation where they are going to add veteran talent with some of their youth, guys under contract, and they're going to say, listen, I don't care what your name is, what position you played, we're putting the 5 best offensive linemen out there, and that's going to be the situation. Does that mean that we end up with Bobby Massey at right tackle, Matt Slauson at left guard, Hronis Grasu at center, Ted Larson at right guard, and Kyle Long at left tackle? My thought on this is that the Bears organization brought in extra depth here. Those are low risk signings. If you need to move on from them, that's fine, but they can fill in and help you. One of the 2 will. So if one of them needs to be a backup at center or a backup at guard, you've got that depth in case somebody gets injured. There's a lot of injuries on the offensive line. It's very common if you have an offensive lineman injured. You have a veteran guy that can step in and play. That's probably the first and foremost thought. And if Hronis Grasu can't make that adjustment to step up and be ready to start, is one of these guys moves into the starting role, at least until Grasu gets better bearing of the center position in the NFL. But I guarantee there's some thought that said we saw promise with Kyle Long at right tackle, but maybe left tackle is where we can utilize him best because of his athleticism. He's the Bears' best offensive lineman. Wouldn't you want your best offensive lineman to be left tackle? I don't know if I'm of that mindset because left tackle is a unique position, as we saw where Charles Leno Jr. struggled at pretty much every other position, but held his own at left tackle. It's an interesting position, and it takes a certain skill set usually. So can Kyle Long do it? He showed some struggles in open space on the right side. He showed that in some situations where, like Julius Peppers, where he struggled against Peppers in that first game, but that second game he held his own against Julius Peppers. He held his own against some big name guys, but then got eaten alive by some other guys. Are they hoping that having a whole off season to prepare and be ready is going to be enough to move him to left side and protect Jay Cutler's blind side? I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what happens at camp and how they line up in those first few practices. I'll tell you that. But I guarantee, barring any sort of major injuries, that you're not going to have a last-second position switch like you did last year, because that really took its toll on the Bears. And then the most recent signing was they signed safety Omar Bolden, and that was a move to be he fills a void at the safety position just for bodies, but he's really a special team standout. If they need him to play safety as a last-ditch effort, injuries, etc., he can play, but he's a special teams guy. I had somebody email me a question, and I thought it was an interesting one. They said, I'm paraphrasing now because I don't have the question in front of me, but Chip Kelly, when he was at the Eagles, he was going out and trying to bring in all these Oregon players to be on the Eagles because they knew his system. They were familiar with him, and he was familiar with them and what he was getting. And did I think that that's what John Fox and Ryan Pace were doing with Denver Bronco players? I thought it was a really good question and pretty astute. But I think there's a huge difference in what they're doing. I do really subscribe to that philosophy, is you want to make sure that the player plays well in your system, works well with you as a coach, because not everybody, there's personality meshes. Think about any boss you've ever had. Have you got along with every boss you've ever had? Did some bosses you work harder for than others? That's the same way with coaches. Is you respond better to certain types of personalities, and you want to make sure that a player is going to work well with you, work well within your system, is going to be good in the locker room, and be worth what you bring him in for. Chip Kelly, though, was bringing in guys that were good at the University of Oregon, but they didn't necessarily mean they were going to be good professional football players. John Fox and Ryan Pace are bringing in guys that came off of a Super Bowl winning team, and a team that's been a perennial playoff team for the last several years. These are players that are playing at a high caliber in the league. So it's a much different situation. If you're bringing in known commodities, bringing in guys from your college program, albeit it's great that you feel comfortable they can run your system, but can those players play well against NFL level talent? Whereas these Bronco players shown that they can. They absolutely can bring in. They can absolutely play at an NFL level. What else? So I thought that was a good question, but it proves my point that I think the Bears are really trying to make smart moves and using free agency in a smart way. Ryan Pace really would love to build this team to be like the Green Bay Packers, where they so infrequently bring in free agent players. But I think the Packers do it at a fault, where sometimes you need to supplement with free agency. They only want to do it with the draft and reward their players. I think the Bears have an opportunity to build mostly with the draft, with smart drafts, but then supplement that if a good player comes available and is a position of need, of course, dip in there. Use that as savings. The Bears still have like a little over $23 million left to spend, minus whatever the rookie cap is. I haven't looked that up, but probably around $5 or $6 million. So 17, 18 million left to spend. They've still got a lot of money left, so look for them to sign for a bunch of other free agents. But they're looking at either if they're going to bring a multi-year guy, it's going to be a guy that they know and they're comfortable with, or a guy that has a very, very high upside, like a Danny Trevathan, like a Akeem Hicks, Bobby Massey, those guys that they have very high upside. Or they're going to be guys that they know, like Tracy Porter, like Zach Miller. But if they're not going to sign a guy that they're not that comfortable with, unless it's a one-year deal or a low-cost deal, because they don't want to get stuck with bad money contracts. That's going to be a huge thing. You can't be in salary cap hell and compete in the NFL. I had another question where it was, they want to know if these Bears signings are tipping their hat at what they're going to do in the NFL draft. I'm going to say no. You would think that by signing some offensive linemen that you're saying, well, we're not going to draft an offensive lineman, or we signed a safety, we're not going to draft a safety. I don't think that's the case. I think what they're trying to do with free agency is they're going to make the assumption that they're not drafting anybody. They're going to go in, they're going to fill any voids they have on this roster with some level of talent. And whether it be re-signing their own free agents or signing somebody off the street or from another team, they want to make sure that they have roster positions filled up so they don't have to draft for need. So if you want to carry 4 corners onto your roster and you only have 4 corners, so you're going to have no competition, is maybe your better bet is to sign a free agent safety, so you have 5 and you have choices, and if you draft somebody, you can always cut another player. I think what they want to do is just fill out their roster. They want to make sure that they have a solid offensive line with what they have without having to draft somebody. They want to make sure that they have enough defensive backs, regardless if they draft somebody. They want to make sure that they have enough linebackers and whatever position. They want to make sure that they have enough guys go into camp and put together an NFL roster without having to draft somebody. It's because when you have to draft a position, that's when you make big mistakes. When the Bears drafted Chris Williams at left tackle, everybody knew the Bears had to draft an offensive tackle. And they went into that draft and they said, we have to draft an offensive tackle. And they went with whoever was left, the best tackle that was left on the board. Not the best player that was left on the board, but the best tackle that was left on the board. And they ended up with Chris Williams, and he had red flags as medical concerns, and he didn't play well for the Bears. And that's the type of situation that you have. You want to make sure that you are drafting from a position of power. You want to make sure that you don't have any glaring needs. And sure, you're going to have, if you're the Bears, that you didn't make the playoffs and you had the 11th worst record in the NFL, you're going to have holes, but you want to make sure that they're not glaring holes where you don't even have enough bodies to go in. The Bears have enough bodies. They have enough running backs. They have enough quarterbacks. They have enough offensive linemen, wide receivers. Every position, they have enough players that they can field a team, and it's going to be a competitive team. They may have a losing record, but at least they can compete. And that way, when the draft comes, they can stick with their plan of drafting best player available. And if you draft best player available, most likely you're going to upgrade one of those positions. And if you keep doing that, you are going to be the Green Bay Packers. You're going to be the New England Patriots. Who else could we see sign if we're the Chicago Bears? Well, like I said, after your rookie salary cap allocation of money, you probably have around $17 million and change to spend. I think they probably will try to sign another veteran defensive back, either as a special teamer or as somebody that can be a starting level. Maybe another defensive tackle, possibly a wide receiver, whoever's out there. I haven't checked in detail who's signed because there's a lot of these low radar moves like Omar Bolden, Ted Larson, etc. that I don't keep up with on a daily basis. So I would need to look and see who's available. But I look for them to bring in a few more veterans on low-cost contracts that can compete for a spot in camp. Probably defensive backs, probably defensive lines, maybe a wide receiver. Those are the positions I'm looking at. And that sets the Bears up for when draft day comes. And when they go, they're going to have a plan. There's always a plan. You have your draft board ready. And when you pick your first round, you need to go in there with, if you are the Xth pick, you need to have X number of guys that you are comfortable drafting in your position. So if you're the Bears and you're drafting 11, you need to have 11 guys that you would be comfortable drafting with that first pick. And if you're not at that position, you need to draft out or consider trading, looking for trade partners. Because if you only have 5 guys that you're comfortable drafting in that position, odds are those 5 guys are going to be gone by the time you get there. You need at least 11 that you're comfortable with to be able to stick in that spot, because that's kind of how it goes. Is if you are only looking at 1, 2, 3 guys, those guys are probably being looked at by other teams too. So if you're the Bears at number 11, you want to make sure that you have 11 picks that you are comfortable with. And if I'm the Bears, I don't know if I have 11 picks. I'm really hoping a certain situation happens. For me, I'm comfortable drafting Jalen Ramsey. I'm comfortable drafting Laramie Tunsil. I'm comfortable drafting 2 quarterbacks. That's Carson Wentz and Jared Goff. I'm comfortable drafting Ronnie Stanley. That's 5. I'm comfortable drafting Miles Jack. That's 6. I don't know if I can come up with that many guys. I don't know if I'm comfortable drafting Vernon Hargreaves at that early in the draft. And a lot of people think he's a top 5 pick, but I don't see it. DeForest Buckner, he's one of my guys. That's 7. I don't know. We'll talk about the offensive tackles later today, but I have seen a lot of mocks where they put Jack Conklin in with the Bears pick, and I like him. I really do. I don't know if I like him in the 11th pick. If you want him, you could probably trade back a little later and get him. I'm looking at just a random list, so because I'm drawing a blank on some names. Laramie Tunsil, I'm fine with drafting within the number 11 pick. Jalen Ramsey, yes. Joey Bosa, Miles Jack, Jared Goff, DeForest Buckner, Carson Wentz. So that's 7. Ronnie Stanley, yes, 8. Shaq Lawson, that's 9. And that's it. I don't see value with the 11th overall pick drafting Ezekiel Elliott. I don't see that value. I don't see the value at that early with Vernon Hargreaves or Laquan Treadwell or Darren Lee. I think Darren Lee is a very good player. I just not for the system that the Bears run. Sheldon Rankins, I think he's very good. I don't see him that early being worthwhile. Same with Reggie Ragland, Eli Apple, Ashawn Robinson, Jack Conklin. I don't see value at the number 11 pick. Last year, with the 7th pick, there was 10 guys that I was very comfortable, 10 plus guys I was very comfortable drafting, and the Bears got probably one of the 2 that I reasonably thought that would be available, and I really liked. They got one of the 2. This year, it's a very weak first round, probably weak second round. I hear a lot of sports announcers say, well, it's going to be a really deep draft. This is going to be epic proportion deep draft. I think those sportscasters clearly aren't looking at the players in this draft, and they're not evaluating them. This is actually a pretty weak draft class. Sure, there's a lot. It's going to be you're going to get better talent in the later rounds than in other drafts. But in the first couple rounds, at least the first round, probably first two, is you're going to see a lot of busts, and you're going to see a lot of guys that are drafted early because there's nobody else. This draft lacks a lot of superstar talent. And like the wide receivers are weak, the cornerbacks are weak, the safeties for the most part are weak, quarterbacks are weak. There's very few positions that are very strong, but there's a lot of later round talent that's available. So it's most drafts are very top heavy and then weak at the end. This one is weak in the front and then sort of levels out going back. So with that, I guess not much else to say about the Chicago Bears, but we can talk about this week. We're going to discuss the offensive tackles in the NFL draft. And if you're new to this show or you haven't listened in some time, what we do is basically from after the Super Bowl until the NFL draft, every week we take a position in the NFL draft and break down several of the top players and give my version of their ability to play in the NFL. And I don't watch the highlight reels. I don't watch select plays because that doesn't really tell me anything about the player. Anybody can have a highlight reel. I go through and watch game film, game snippets, where I watch every single snap that player played in an entire game. And I watch several games. So I see every tendency they have. What do they do if they're an offensive lineman and it's a sweep play the other direction? What do they do? Are they lazy down the field? What if it's a wide receiver on a run play? Do they go out down the field and block? I want to know all of these things, not just what happens on a spectacular play that they make. So this week is offensive tackles, and we don't have a lot of positions left because we don't have a lot of weeks before the NFL draft. So we have offensive tackles this week we're going to go through. Next week is going to be defensive end / 3-4 outside linebacker, which is going to be an important one because I think the Bears have a possibility to go after one or two of those. And then the final week, like two weeks from today, we'll be doing 4-3 outside linebackers. And I saved that one for last because that used to be an important one for the Chicago Bears, but running a 3-4 system, not as important. So so this week will be offensive tackles, and I'm going to start with Laramie Tunsil. Laramie Tunsil, you probably all heard the name. I would say 95% of mock drafts I see pick him as the number one overall pick. 6'5", 310 pounds out of Ole Miss. He is big. He moves really well for a big man, has really good technique. But the only cons I could really find is he does have an injury history, and he had a good number of false start penalties, which need to be cleaned up in the NFL. But he absolutely looks like a number one overall pick when you watch him. He has the ability to be an anchor at left tackle for a decade. He just plug and play. He's going to be a day one starter. He's got the strength. He's got the speed. He's got the technique. He's going to come in there and may struggle a little bit because it's hard to step in from college to the NFL level and just be a superstar right off the bat, but he's going to get better and he's going to be a very good pick. Next is Ronnie Stanley, 6'6", 312 out of Notre Dame. And I know a lot of times I've mocked him to the Bears and I thought that he'd be a good fit for the Bears. And that was me watching Notre Dame games as somebody just sitting as a fan rather than watching individual players and watching as a scouting type tool. Now that I sat down and watched a lot of game film on Ronnie Stanley, he is a really great competitor. He's got a really good NFL size body, long arms. He's tough, athletic. He playing at Notre Dame, he played against big time competition. But Ronnie Stanley at 6'6", tends to stand upright a little too much. And if you're an offensive lineman, you really need to win the leverage game unless you are the Incredible Hulk and just so strong that nobody can move you. If you're an offensive lineman, you need to make sure you have leverage. And Ronnie Stanley a lot of times uses toughness and speed and is just overwhelming athletic ability. and stood upright. And it's easier to stand upright than it is to keep that leverage, especially at a guy that big, 6'6", 312. But he plays high a lot of times. He's going to need to sink down better. If you watch the plays where he stands up high, he can be driven backwards. That's not a good sign. And he could stand to get stronger. He's not the strongest of guys. Also, he's very, very raw. He's going to need a lot of time to develop into a solid NFL player. So people are drafting him for potential rather than Laramie Tunsil went out there and he proved it. Ronnie Stanley he's got a combination of he did some things and still has a lot of potential because he's still raw. I think Ronnie Stanley is going to be a very good left tackle in the league. He might not be a day one starter, though. So if somebody wants to draft him with a top 10 pick, they're pretty much there's a good chance they might redshirt him unless they're a really bad team and throw him to the Wolves year one. Jack Conklin is a name that I've heard mocked to the Bears in several mock drafts. He's 6'6", 308 out of Michigan State. He is a big man. He just looks bigger than what his size is. Very powerful, good hand technique, nice footwork. He's fundamentally solid, but he's not fast and not athletic. I didn't like him at all at first watching him, but the more film I watched, the more I liked him. I liked him more and more every time I watched him. You might think that a guy like this that isn't really that athletic and is kind of a mauler, he might fit better at right tackle. But if you look at his technique, he's really solid, and I think that solid technique will allow him to play either side, making him really versatile. He can play right tackle, he can play left tackle. That's going to be valuable in the NFL, and I think that's going to serve him well. If you asked me to kind of give a person I thought he reminded me of, it would be like Andrew Whitworth for Cincinnati, where he's a big mauling guy, but he's got really good technique that allows him to play left tackle at a high level. I think Jack Conklin is a nice pick. Is he worth the number 11 overall pick? I don't know. I don't know if I would pull the trigger on that. But if in the second half of the first round, oh, you better bet I'm willing to draft Jack Conklin. Next is Taylor Decker, 6'7", 310 out of Ohio State. He's another giant of a man, strong, good handwork. So if you watch his hands, he fights well with his hands. When you're an offensive lineman, especially left tackle, is the guy that's coming in, the defensive end or the outside linebacker, whoever it is, they come in, you want to make sure that you have your hands that you can use. If they try to beat you with speed, you keep them occupied with your hands. If they're bull rushing, keep them with your hands so you can move them with your hands. If you let them get into your body like so, you can get bullied around and pushed around a lot. So you don't want to let him in. So you want to be able to use your hands well, and he does really good with his hands. But 6'7", he stands upright too much. He stands up tall. He loses that leverage. He shows a lot that he doesn't always know who to block. I don't know if brains are a problem for him or if the defense confuses him, but I see a lot of times where he looks lost of who to block, and he looks around, like literally turns his head and looks around and then just runs at somebody and hits them. Not necessarily the guy he's supposed to hit. That makes me wonder of what his level of understanding a complicated offensive line scheme might be. But I see him as a very talented right guard, especially as a power run team. I think that's best place for him as a right tackle. And it's funny because all of the best tackles in college football play left tackle, but in the NFL they may not be somebody that can play left tackle. And they still might be a good player, but they might have to get plugged at right tackle. And I think that's the case with Taylor Decker. Next, I have Jason Spriggs, 6'6", 301 out of Indiana. He's got a really nice size frame. Not too small, but not too massive either. He was really productive at Indiana, very athletic, but he lacks a lot of upper body strength. I didn't look up his numbers at the combine for the bench press, but I don't think they were very good based on watching him play. He's a converted tight end, lacks experience at the tackle position. You're going to have to let him grow into that position a little more. Sure, he was productive at Indiana and was a second team All Big Ten, but he played a lot of years as tight end and he's going to have to adjust at an NFL level. I probably see him as in a zone blocking scheme, but so if I'm a zone blocking team, I take a higher chance on Jason Spriggs than maybe the Bears do, but I'd like to see how he progresses. Next is Sean Coleman, 6'5", 307 out of Auburn. He's a massive human being. Really tough to move him. Heavy hands, strong upper body, big-time competition playing in the SEC. But he has got awful footwork. Awful. He tends to lunge a lot. Needs to be consistent with his handwork. He's got the ability to have good handwork, but he doesn't necessarily always do it. And he's an older player. He's going to come in the draft, can't remember if he was 25 or 26, but he's older because he came up with cancer while he was in school and spent a long time being treated for his cancer. So he's going to come out a little older, and he's also recovering from an MCL tear. So Sean Coleman, right tackle all the way, maybe even a guard. See how they move him because he's so plodding. They might move him to like a right guard, but I think he's powerful enough to play in the NFL. And the last guy I wanted to talk about is LaRaven Clark, 6'5", 316 out of Texas Tech. He's really athletic for a guy that's 6'5", 316. He's got decent footwork, but he has awful trouble with speed rushers. Everything he does is coming out of a back pedal, and that's partly because that's the offensive scheme that Texas Tech runs. Their tackles they retreat. So a lot of other programs will fire out and meet the defensive lineman. At Texas Tech, everything is retreating back and then reacting from there. And from a retreat, he got beat every which way by speed rushers. They would go to the outside, he'd get beat to the outside. They would fake outside and do a move inside, and he would get beat all the time. It was not pretty sight. And he lacks a lot of really good upper body strength. But like I said, he's a constant back pedal at Texas Tech, which is he has poor NFL technique, partly / mostly due to the system that he was running in at Texas Tech. But I think he projects as a guard in this league, likely a left guard. He's an interesting guy. You can't teach size, and he's athletic for his size. I could see him being a good pulling guard. So those are the tackles I talked about. Like I say every week, if there's somebody you're interested in, I didn't cover him, please feel free to send me a message and say, hey, you didn't cover this guy. Can you talk about him? I'm more than willing to look into him. I just sort of pick a bunch of random names and then draw a line somewhere because I can't talk about everybody in the draft. I don't have enough time. But if there's somebody you want to know about, I'm more than happy to go in and look. And this is probably one of the very few positions I've talked about, other than maybe running back, that I think is very deep in this draft. All the guys I'm talking about, I would not be shocked if all of them were gone by the end of the second round. There's a need for good tackles in this league, and this is a pretty deep draft. There's a lot of pretty athletic, big guys in this draft. I think this is going to be a very deep tackle draft. I don't know if it's going to be deep in number of rounds that it goes, but it's going to be deep in number of guys taken. There's going to be a lot of offensive tackles taken in the first few rounds. Like I said, we talked about the offensive tackles. Next week will be defensive end / outside linebackers in the 3-4 scheme, and then the week after that will be outside linebackers. Then we'll be at the NFL draft. Be ready to go. And with that, I want to talk about Mock Draft 6.0. In addition to breaking down the position players in the draft every week, we also do a mock draft. So what I do is, rather than guess at who everybody's taking, and I'm not as well versed in the San Diego Chargers or the Cleveland Browns as I am the Chicago Bears. I don't follow those teams, so I can guess what they want to pick. But what I do is I use a website called firstpick.com. So it's the word first, pick.com, to simulate what the other teams will draft, and they base it on their needs and big board rankings of players. So that way, when it comes to the Bears, I don't have any bias in making, Jared Goff fall to the Bears per se, or Laramie Tunsil fall to the Bears, so I can pick them. It's out of my hands. Whoever's available on the board when the Bears pick, that's who I pick. So for this week's mock draft, which is mock draft 6.0, I have in the very first round, with the number 11 pick, the Bears drafting Jared Goff. And I saw him fall in this mock draft. I was like, I can't see Jared Goff falling this far. And I looked, and there's a possibility. There really is a possibility. You have the Cleveland Browns have signed RG3. So are they going to go out and draft a first-round quarterback? Maybe, maybe not. Probably other needs if you went out there and got that quarterback. The 49ers, maybe they take a first-round quarterback as well. I don't see both of them taking it. Maybe only one. And then after that, the Ravens have a quarterback. The Cowboys have a quarterback. They can use somebody to develop. I don't see Jerry Jones doing that. The Chargers have a quarterback. A lot of these teams that are ahead of the Bears have a quarterback. So I honestly could see a Jared Goff falling to the Bears. And what's the point of taking Jared Goff if you're the Bears? Well, he's probably, if he's not the best quarterback in this draft, he's probably second best. And this is a quarterback-driven league. And Jay Cutler is only under contract for what, 2 more years, 3 more years? And after this year, it's pretty easy to cut him financially. So you take Jared Goff and you develop him. If you let him learn under Jay Cutler, you don't pin your hopes on a rookie quarterback, is you let him sit, kind of like Aaron Rodgers did, kind of like Steve Young did, kind of like a lot of good quarterbacks did. They didn't have to come right in and start and get beat up. Is let him play in the practices, let him play in preseason games. If you're blowing somebody out or you're getting blown out, let him come in and play some mop-up minutes. Let him get his experience that way. That way you are setting yourself up for the future. And you don't have to draft another quarterback for a long time. Moving on to the second round, pick 10. Robert Nkemdiche falls to the Chicago Bears. There was one time when he was looked at as possibly one of the top 5 picks in this draft, but character concerns make this guy make him drop really far, all the way to the second round. I don't know if that's going to happen, but there's a possibility. And Robert Nkemdiche, if he falls to you in the second round, you lick your chops and say, that's my guy, I'm going to take him. You've got Eddie Goldman, your second round pick last year. You put Akeem Hicks on one side, you put Robert Nkemdiche on the other side, and next thing you know is suddenly you have a really good run defense that's going to get after the quarterback as well. That's a heck of a defensive line with very, very minimal invested into that. In the third round, pick 9, I have TJ Green, safety out of Clemson. I've talked about him a couple weeks ago when I talked about the safeties. I think he has some baggage with him as far as some flaws in his play, but I saw enough of him where I thought if he was available in the late second or early third round, I would definitely snatch him up because there's something about him that really intrigues me, and I think he could be a good player in this league. And it's funny because after I watched film and I saw that, I started reading some comments about him because of watching tape on him. So after I watched it, and I saw several anonymous professional scouts and unnamed GMs that were saying that there's a big buzz around him. So will he be available in the third round? If he is, I think he'd be a good choice. You could pair him with Adrian Amos and have a really nice safety combination. that's young, hungry, and rookie contract paid. With the 8th pick in the 4th round, I have Keanu Neal. He's a free safety and strong safety. Played both positions not at the same time, but he played both positions at Florida. He is at that point, you already picked a free safety. You have your 6th or 5th round safety last year who started every single game for you. Do you need another safety? I look at it as best player available. And when I drafted, he was far and away, I thought, the best player available. So you draft him. If nothing else, he pushes somebody for competition. Maybe he beats out on a TJ Green. Maybe somebody gets hurt. Maybe he just plays special teams. I think best player available, he's available. Your 2nd 4th round pick number 29, you go wide receiver with Aaron Burbridge out of Michigan State. I like him, and he's an intriguing guy in that round. I think he's somebody that's going to slip through the cracks and fall. And he's going to give you some really good depth in the wide receiver position and make that a strength rather than last year it was a weakness. The 5th round, pick number 11, I have the Bears taking Kelvin Taylor, running back out of Florida. Again, is this a position of need? Not necessarily. But when I drafted, he was the best player available, and I felt like he could probably he could play special teams or compete with Jaquiz Rodgers, or even be a 4th running back on the roster, or compete for that 3rd roster spot. Hell, if he has a really good camp, nothing saying that he's not going to beat out Kadeem Carey or Jeremy Langford. But always having a young, fresh set of legs with the running back can never hurt. In round 6, pick number 10, I have the Bears taking Blake Martinez, inside linebacker out of Stanford. Do you need an inside linebacker? No, but he's a special teams. And when you're picking in the 6th round, you start looking at athleticism or a certain trait rather than the whole package, because these are guys that clearly have question marks in their game of whether or not they can play, because otherwise they would have been drafted. I like the program he comes out of in Stanford. He's a tough-nosed kid, fundamentally solid. He could play special teams. He could step in and play well in this defense if need be, I think, in some time. 6th round, the 31st pick. Again, this was best player available. I took Aaron Green, running back out of TCU. When you draft a running back that late, who knows if they can play in the NFL? If you draft 2, sure you're going to get at least 1. Or you get 2 special teamers. Or somebody just doesn't make the roster. The beauty of having this many picks is not having them all make the roster. It's that you have more bites at the apple to make sure that the guys that make the roster are good fits and are good hits. And you want to have at least bare minimum 3 guys that are solid contributors to your team from this draft, at least. Probably looking at if you can get 4 or 5, being much better off. But last but not least is round 7, pick 9. I have the Bears taking Kevin Peterson, cornerback out of Oklahoma State. I think he's an absolute steal at this point. He could give you, he could probably step in and be your nickel or dime cornerback and also contribute in special teams. I think he's a great player there. And I was surprised that he fell that far, because I probably have him as a mid to late 5th round pick. So having him fall to early to mid 7th round is an absolute steal. And with that, I'm going to wrap up the Bears talk. I'm going to move on to the Blackhawks a little bit. We talk about this every week. The Blackhawks are an absolute enigma. You have such talent. You have a core that's won multiple Stanley Cup championships, but they're just not able to put it together consistently other than that 12-game winning streak. The rest of the season, they've had a lot of trouble playing consistent hockey. Part of it is injuries. You have Shaw is injured. You have Crawford, who has an undisclosed upper body injury, which I'm hearing is vertigo. And he's skating now, but he's not able to play yet. And then you add on top of that, you've got this defense shuffle where you don't know who your blue liners are, who your top 6 guys are on defense. You don't know who your best pairings are. You're positive of your top 3, and it's Duncan Keith, Brent Seabrook, and Nicholas Hjalmarsson. But then who are the next 3? You're tossing around Gustafsson, you're tossing around Svedberg, you're tossing around Trevor Van Riemsdyk, you're tossing around Michael Roosevelt, you're tossing around Christian Ehrhoff. There's 5 guys that you're shuffling in, and you're shuffling around who your rotation is, you're shuffling around who the pairings are, and none of this is adding to gelling the pairings. I mean, if it's me, I put Duncan Keith with Brent Seabrook, like you have the last several Stanley Cup runs. You know you've got a solid pairing there. You know they know how to play together. Then they have at least one really good defensive pairing. Put those 2 together, then let it flow. Because right now you have 3 questionable pairings. Duncan Keith and Nick Hjalmarsson. Duncan Keith has had, for Duncan Keith, a down season. You have, for the first probably 2/3 of the season, Nick Hjalmarsson was probably having one of the better years of his career, but as of late, he's really been up and down. So you have that pairing, which has not been fantastic, and then you have Seabrook with Gustafsson, you have Seabrook with TVR, you have Seabrook playing with whoever. That pairing is not doing well, and then the third pairing, it's just been, a lot of nights it's been hot garbage. Whether you have old and slow or young and inexperienced, whoever you throw out there, it just hasn't been that good. So why not put your 2 best defensemen together, or your best 2 that form a really good pair, and have Keith and Seabrook, and just play, and then let Hjalmarsson work out with somebody else, see who he's best plays with, and then hope and pray on that third pairing, and probably lean on the top 2. I don't know why they don't do that. I'm shocked they don't do that. But if they don't get better play from the defensemen, they're not going to make a long run. Special teams, not good for the Blackhawks. For a while we were talking about, penalty kill's awful, but the power play has been pretty good. We can live with that. No, the power, you can't. If it's me, I would always rather have a solid penalty kill and a suspect power play, because, all right, you get, 3 chances in a power play? If you are bad at penalty kill, you are probably going to give up 1, maybe 2. You're much better odds are winning a game if you have a better penalty kill than a power play. So I would much rather have the penalty kill, and power play is usually much more streaky unless you're one of the top elite teams at the power play, which the Blackhawks aren't. They were just streaky at the moment, and now they're streaking back the other way and going back to their consistency of not being that good of a power play unit. So you have them struggling on both ends there, and the penalty kill has been a little bit better, but they still have a long way to go. But the 5-on-5 hasn't been that great. You look at some of the games out there, and they're consistently being inconsistent in scoring and getting scoring opportunities. If you look at time of possession, their ice time on the offensive zone is down from other years. That means the other team is playing way more time in the Blackhawks zone. That's an indictment on their defense, an indictment on their offense as well. They go hand in hand a little bit. This isn't some sport. This isn't football where one's on the field and your offense is on the field and defense is on the bench. This is hockey. It's they roll into one. Your defense turns into your offense and vice versa. You look at some of their last games and they're just giving up a ton of goals. They gave up 4 to Boston and 4 to the Jets, and it's just not good play. You're going to really need a better play from your defensemen and better, more consistent setting it up and passing and play on the offensive zone. And then when you look at And then I guess we'll talk about the Duncan Keith incident. So we have the Blackhawks, which, mind you, they lost to the Minnesota Wild. That means they got swept in the season series by the Minnesota Wild. 0-5 versus the Minnesota Wild. That's bad. You can't get swept by a division opponent in 5 games that's also going to be a playoff team that you could see in the playoffs and have them sweep you in a season and consider that all right. You can't do that. And then you had an even more ugly incident, and there was a play where a player from the Minnesota Wild cross-checked Duncan Keith across the face and then yanked his skates out from under him. And Duncan Keith responded by just smashing him in the face with his stick. What happens in sports is pretty universal rule is they always see the retaliator, almost never see the instigator. So the guy from the Wild was the instigator. They didn't see either instigating incident, but they definitely saw Duncan Keith slash him. The league saw Duncan Keith slash him. The league, in their response, ended up suspending him, offering him an in-person hearing, which is never good if it's one of your team players. He declined, decided to have a phone hearing. They gave him a 6-game suspension, which is going to wrap up the regular season and suspend him for the first game of the playoffs. And I keep vacillating back and forth. Do I think this is a fair penalty? I had a listener that said that he thought it was unfair, and I had another one who said he thought it was fair. And I look at it, and it's hard to say. When you look at the whole incident and everything that came up to it, there was a heated exchange. He had just been smashed in the face with a stick and a cross check, and then had his skates yanked out from under him. And when you're in the heat of the moment, of course you react to somebody doing that. So you can sort of justify it. But this is also the third incident that he's had. If you're the NHL, you've got to make a statement of it. And I feel like the NHL sat down and said, listen, we can't have him doing that. Even if it was justified, we have to make an example. And if we just do it for the regular season, we're not really punishing them because the Blackhawks are pretty much locked in their playoff spot. Unless something crazy happens. But they're going to be probably playing the St. Louis Blues in that first round. And we're going to have to set some sort of example as we'll give him one playoff game as a suspension. That's going to hit home a little more. So do I think it was fair? I think there should have been a suspension on the other side too for the instigation. Maybe a 1 or 2 game there. But Duncan Keith is a third-time offender, and in the response, the NHL called him a violent and repeated offender. And if the shoe fits, sometimes you got to wear it, even if it's a guy that's on your team that's going to try to help you win a Stanley Cup. Luckily, it's only one playoff game, and hopefully it just doesn't impact us, but we shall see. And if you're the Blackhawks, you've got a lot of things swirling around that bring a lot of doubt of whether or not you can win back-to-back Stanley Cups here. You have a lot of odds stacked up against you. Going into the Stanley Cups, you want a goalie that's very hot-handed. Your goalie hasn't played in a while because he's suffering from some sort of upper body injury, which I'm hearing is vertigo. So you don't know what you're going to get out of Corey Crawford. Scott Darling has come back to earth a little bit. He's played okay, but he's not been lights out like Corey Crawford is. You see the value in Corey Crawford now, if you didn't before. You're struggling on defense. You're not gelling on your forwards, your forward lines. You're just not gelling there. Your formula for the last 3 cups has been rolling 4 lines out and playing good defense. And they're starting to get better. You have the second line, which has been great. The fourth line, now that you have, once Shaw comes back, you'll have Shaw, Kruger, and Desjardins, who was a staple for you in the playoffs last year. And then you hope that Hossa, Taves, and Andrew Ladd are going to be that ignition on the first line. And then it just leaves figuring out who the best 3 to play on that third line is. But there's a lot of odds stacked up against the Blackhawks, especially there's some very good teams that are going to pose threats to you. You've got the LA Kings, who could legitimately beat you. They've been the one that's prevented you from absolutely being called a dynasty by everybody. And you've got the Dallas Stars, who are greatly improved and blown you out the last couple times they've played. You've got the St. Louis Blues, who have been a thorn in your side the last few years and played you very tough. You've got both the California teams and Anaheim Ducks and the San Jose Sharks, who I guess probably one of them is going to beat up on the other one and knock them out. But those are two teams that are very, very good teams. Those are just in your conference. You look, and you've got the Washington Capitals that could legitimately beat you as well. There's a lot of formidable talent out there and teams that you're going to have to be on your A game. This is the Stanley Cup Finals. It's not a fluke when somebody goes through and wins. It's a team that is playing the absolute best. And the Blackhawks are not playing their best right now, and they've only got a handful of more games left. And sure, they had a great game against a team that's fighting for their playoff lives in the Boston Bruins, and they scored 6 goals on them. But they also gave up 4, including 2 late ones that scare you a little bit. This is a team that needs to put up or shut up, and hopefully when we have our show next week, we will know who our opponent is in the playoffs and can start game planning and talking about what we expect to see. Moving on to the Chicago Bulls. I don't want to talk about them too much. They're bad. They had another bad loss last night to a team that's ahead of them in the standings in the Detroit Pistons, and they need to win those games if they have any hope of making the playoffs. I personally am on the ilk of that think, what's the point of making the playoffs? You're going to get embarrassed by Cleveland again. Might as well go into the lottery and have some chance of getting a top pick. You're better off than knowing you're going to get blown out. There's absolutely zero chance of the Bulls winning the NBA Finals. Zero. None. Especially if they don't make the playoffs. And if you watch them, even against the game they won against Houston, Houston is basically a mirror version of the Chicago Bulls, you have bad spacing on offense. Guys bunched up. Can't run a pick and roll to save their lives. No sense of the shot clock, with Dougie McBuckets blowing a shot clock have a shot clock violation. Was it 2 or 3 of them? They have no sense of the shot clock. Sometimes Jimmy's going to be a ball hog and just take the ball and shoot. Same with Derek. But other guys, they're looking to pass, and there's no sense of as a team of when to shoot, what the offense is, and how it's supposed to be run. You've got inconsistent minutes for Doug McDermott. Doug McDermott, I know I've talked a lot of crap about him, but he's been greatly improved in the second half of the season. He's shown he can be an NBA scorer, and he showed that he can play really well and shoot the lights out of a building. But he's also shown that he can be sitting on the bench, he can't play defense, or he can be cold. If he's going to be a future for your team, then you need to make sure that you're giving him consistent minutes so he can play and develop. You have Taj Gibson, who's suffering from a broken rib, and then he's also calling out the media saying, leave our coach alone. But why isn't Taj Gibson turning into his own locker room and talking to Jimmy Butler and talking to Paul Gasol and talking to Derrick Rose and telling them to lay off the coach? The media is not the ones that are verbally attacking Fred Hoiberg nearly as much as his own players. You need to have accountability as a team. Stop looking to find other people that you can point at when there's a mirror that you can absolutely point at, and that's probably the right target. You've got Derrick Rose hurt again with a hurt elbow. General soreness over there is absolutely ridiculous. He's a shell of his former self. You can't count on him as being a piece to any sort of puzzle if you're the Chicago Bulls. When you looked at the game against the Rockets, the last 3 or 4 minutes of that game was pretty much the epitome of poor defense. You have you let the Houston Rockets, go right up the court, shoot wide open 3-pointers. You have, off of a missed free throw, you have a guy, catch a deep pass and go right down the lane and score. You have uncontested shots. This team has no sense of what it's like to play a team defense. It's just mental lapses and not know what they're going. And it's ridiculous. And if you look at the NBA, of the 4 major sports, I would argue that the NBA is the hardest one to build a championship team, because all it is who has the most superstars. If you've got a Draymond Green and a Steph Curry, of course you're going to be a contender. If you have a Kyrie Irving and a LeBron James, of course you're going to be a contender. But if you have a Jimmy Butler and a Paul Gasol, you're not going to be a contender. You need the star-powered league. You need superstars, and there's only X number of superstars in this league, and they all want to play together on a team. And that team is not Chicago, because they know if they go there, that's going to be a dysfunctional team. With Tom Thibodeau, is they knew they were going to get a grinding coach that wanted the superstar player to play grinded out minutes like it's the 7th game of the NBA Finals, whether it's a Tuesday night against Milwaukee. They didn't want to play into that. And then they've got Hoiberg, who nobody respects. You don't want to play into that either. If you're the Bulls, how do you get better? The NBA is so tough. Unless you get lucky and you win the draft lottery and you end up with a superstar, you get somebody wanting to pair with that player, it's really tough to build a championship caliber team in today's NBA. So how do you fix their situation? I don't know. I really don't. I mean, for me, you take a hard look and you say, all right, is Fred Hoiberg our future coach? And you could say, well, you're paying him a lot of money, so he has to be. No, you're the Bulls. You make a lot of money. Sure, you don't want to eat it, but if you want to build a contending team for an old owner who probably wants to see another title, is you make those financial situations go away. You pay them off. If he's not your coach, he's not getting the respect of his team. And I just saw a video clip posted on Twitter earlier today, and it shows Tyronn Lue, and it's coming out of a timeout, and he's talking with some of the Cleveland players, and one of the players, I couldn't see who it was because of the video angle, and he's going back in the game, he threw his towel onto Tyronn Lue. His towel, he'd been wiping his sweat off as he was going back on the court, because he can't bring it on the court. He threw it on his coach, the coach of his team. That's such disrespect. And I feel like that is what Fred Hoiberg is getting. His team is not listening to him. His team is not responding. And if you're the Bulls, you go in like with the Bears and you clean house. If you're a problem in the locker room, adios. Doesn't matter what your talent is. Trade you and get some sort of pick for you. So if Taj Gibson, you're old, but you're a trade asset. Adios. Joakim Noah, you don't want to be here anymore, and you're a free agent. Bye-bye. I appreciate what you did. You did some great things while you were here, but time to go. Paul Gasol, adios. Bring your Carlos Boozer game somewhere else. Derrick Rose, if I can trade you, you'll be gone. Jimmy Butler, if I can trade you for quality pieces, you'll be gone too. I'm going to bring in a lot of guys that are my guys, and if you don't like it, then tough crap, you're going to have to deal with it. That's what you're going to have to do. Is that going to bring you an NBA championship? I don't know, but it's a start. Maybe you're not going to be a contender, but what you can do is you can be a team that goes out there and plays tough night in and night out, like the Detroit Pistons. Detroit is not going to win an NBA title this year, but you know what? They go out and they play tough. They play tough against you. The Boston Celtics play tough against you. and they're going to be playing night in and night out at a high level. And those are the types of teams that you can actually convince free agents to go to, because you've got a competitive team without said superstar. So if you add said superstar, these superstars want to get paid, and B, win a ring. If you can show them that A, we have money to pay you, and B, you could come here to this competitive team and make them that much better, that's how you entice them. If you're the Bulls, you've got this dysfunctional soap opera of a team, of a point guard who has no interest in playing this season because he wants to wait till his next contract. You've got your max contract player who forgot how to play defense most of the game, and he's not a team player and doesn't like his coach. You've got another superstar paid player who doesn't play any defense and throws the coach under the bus. And you've got a lot of role players who are just dysfunctional. And again, like I'm on the Bulls, if I can't trade Derrick Rose, what I do is I either draft a point guard or I put Etuan Moore on the court with him and move Derrick Rose to the 2. Let him be a shooting guard. That means I move Jimmy Butler up to the 3. I give more and more minutes to guys that are try-hard, developmental guys. I give more minutes to Doug McDermott. I give more minutes to Cristiano. I give more minutes to Holiday. I give more minutes to those guys because they may not be superstars, but when they're out there, they're at least trying hard. And if try-hard guys are going to do what your coach says, whether or not they are able, they're going to do it to the best of their ability. That's what you want to see. I guess the last thing I want to talk about is Nikolai Mirotic looks tired out there. He just looks winded. And you see him, instead of trying to push the offense forward towards the end of games, just kind of trying to chuck up threes or long twos. And he just looks tired out there. He's got no pep in his step. And I don't know if he's out of shape because when he was injured, he wasn't keeping up with working out and he's just out of shape, or if this is a sign of something else. But Nikolai Mirotic just looks tired out there. And if you have to, you spell him longer, but you got to figure that out. You can't just have an exhausted player out on it. And last but not least, I want to talk about the Cubs and the Sox, because by the time you probably listen to this, it'll be just hours from both of them having their opening day for Major League Baseball. We'll talk Cubs first. Is the Cubs, in that heartbreaking loss to the Mets, they learned a lot of things, and that's important. Is if you walk away from a loss dejected and beat up and in a funk over it, that can be a negative that's going to project onward. But if you look at it as hey, nobody thought we belonged here at this point. We came in here, we played to the best of our abilities. We have nothing to be ashamed of, but we're going to go out there and try to learn from our losses, and be better next year. That's the mark of a winning team. And the Cubs are saying all the right things. They're saying that's what they're doing. But if you look at that Mets series, here's some things you can take away. Don't ever take for granted that you're going to be handed that spot in the playoffs. If you're the Cubs, it's a long season, and you've got to win a lot of games if you're going to go back to the playoffs. Last year, it took 97 wins for them to make the playoffs, and they were a wild card. 97 wins to be a wild card. That's a lot of games. And just because you have all of the expert picks to be the World Series champion doesn't mean anything in the real world. You have to go in there and you have to earn that trip back to the NLCS. And if you want a shot to play in the World Series, you got to earn that. They learned that you've got to be the hot team. They played a Mets team that played an absolutely perfect series. It was an absolutely perfect series, from their pitching to their hitting to their scouting. They outplayed the Cubs, and they deserve to go to the World Series. that the Cubs have to learn from that. That they're going to run into a team that's going to be on fire, like the Cardinals from a few years ago. That was a wild card and came in and won the World Series. It was a team that just caught fire. Everybody caught fire at the right time, and that's the fluke of baseball into the playoffs. And the Cubs have to realize that not only do they have to be talented, but they have to be playing well at the right time. And then the final is they've got to make sure that they're scouting well. Is the Mets knew the Cubs, how to play them, and they out-scouted them. And trust me, come this year, the Cubs are not going to be out-scouted. They're going to know their opponent. They're going to know everything about them, and they're going to know the best way to attack them and attack their weaknesses. When you look at the Major League Baseball playoffs, all you can do if you are an MLB team in a front office is you can set your team up to win the most number of games and put yourself to make the playoffs. That's all you can really work and strive to do. Once the playoff starts, this is probably the most random of any of the sports as far as how the playoffs go. Basketball, for the most part, the best team comes out there and wins. Hockey, for the most part, the best team comes out there and wins. Football, sometimes you just get a fluky team because it's a one-and-done situation where a team loses. That's really good. You go from there. But baseball is such a fluky sport, and anything can happen once the playoff comes. You think about those Braves teams in the 90s that were so great, and with 3 Hall of Fame pitchers, made it to the playoffs every single year, but only had 1 World Series to show for it. And that's just the fluke of baseball. All you can do is put yourself to be a perennial playoff team, and at that point is then you put your best foot forward and you play the best, you scout the best, and you hope that you're the team that catches fire and ends up winning it. And it's going to be a tough one because you're a young upstart team, but the Mets are in the same. They're both National League teams, and they're both young and set up to be long-time good teams. It's going to be, can the Mets get enough hitting to overcome the Cubs, and can the Cubs pitching be maintained enough to overcome the Mets? And there's going to be other teams like the Cardinals and the Giants. They're going to have something to say about it too, that, hey, you young kids, we're the teams that have been here for the last several years. Respect your elders. So it's baseball. Neil Ramirez, it was a question of whether or not he was going to make this roster. Neil Ramirez was out of options. You couldn't send him down to Iowa. They've kept him on the roster. And what are we going to see from him? Is he going to be lights out like he was in his rookie 2014 season? Or is he going to be bad? Well, I guess last year he just was so injured he didn't play much. Who are you going to see from Neil Ramirez? And from what I'm reading is he's been able to get a fastball in the upper 80s, lower 90s. He's lost some velocity on it, but he's got that slider slurve curveball thing that's got a lot of movement on it and is looking good. So you feel like you can get some good innings out of him. So he's definitely somebody that you put on the roster. You add an extra pitcher because you want to be able to carry that and not lose him to another team. And you look at Jorge Soler. This is a guy who only has 125 at-bats in the major leagues. Only 125 games in the major leagues and only 220 games in the minor leagues. That's not a lot. And he's a guy that you're expecting to grow and get better. He's just an absolute man-child, and eventually you're going to see him. You saw the hot streak that he went on in the playoffs, and you hope that starts to carry over, and he learns and gets better. He hasn't played that many games as a professional baseball player, and you hope that he catches on. And you're stuck with the problem of having 4 legitimate major league starting outfielders. That's a position where you can trade for pitching, or if in the case of next year, maybe the National League goes to a designated hitter and you move Schwarber to designated hitter, and then you're set there. Whatever the case may be, but that's a good problem to have as well. And finally is this Cubs team, has a lot of camaraderie. There's no egos involved. Everybody just gets along. They have a lot of fun. And that's all good for building team. When somebody's down, you don't have them sulking. You have a manager who's there trying to keep their mind focused on having fun and enjoying it. You have a team that's full of guys that want to be like brothers to each other. And you also have enough talent where if somebody's stuck in a rut, you can sit them down and be like, hey, listen, don't focus on baseball right now. Get into a good headspace. Take a step back and come back in and have a chance at coming back to it. And that's a situation that when you have a lot of talent, you can do that. And it's also cool is that you have a Cub player in Chris Bryant, who's National League Rookie of the Year, a budding superstar, and he's a really handsome young man. And you have, if you're Major League Baseball, you've got these three like handsome, like young guys that are the face of baseball. And, Chris Bryant, Bryce Harper, and Mike Trout that they have the TV stations, and they have Major League Baseball just going gaga because that's who they're selling to the kids. All these kids want to go out and they want to be these three guys because those are the superstars, and they're young. They're not much older than they are, and it brings females because they're like, I may peripherally like baseball, but I love Chris Bryant. I'm going to get a Chris Bryant jersey or a Bryce Harper jersey. And then the hardcore fans of the game, men and women, they're all like, hey, these are superstars. I like these superstar players. And they're just like charismatic, good-looking guys. It's great problem, or it's a great thing to have in baseball. With the White Sox, we've got I said last year that I thought they would have a very solid year, and I thought they made some good moves. And the season just didn't go as planned. You had a lot of issues with your defense. You had injuries. You had players, everybody having the worst season of their career at the same time. Can you have all those same problems again this year? I thought they made some very smart moves in adding Lowry and adding Todd Frazier. They made a lot of smart moves, but they're also relying on guys bouncing back. You have Adam Eaton, who's going to be one of your starting outfielders. He at times was one of the worst outfielders in baseball. Todd Frazier, who's coming over from the National League, what if he fails at that? It's not always a changing leagues that everybody adjusts to well. You have three very good top of the rotation guys in Quintana, Sale, and Rodon, but is Rodon going to be able to have consistent control of the ball when he throws it? And are you comfortable having all three of your top three guys be lefties? It's great to have a solid lefty star pitcher, but this is a league that's mostly right-handed batters, and if you're going to come up there and you're going to put 1, 2, 3 slot as left-handed pitchers, it's going to be tough, and especially when you aren't comfortable with your number 4 and number 5 pitcher. In a lot of teams' philosophies, your number 5 pitcher, that's the guy that you're hoping he's your young minor league guy that you're hoping is going to bud into a top of the rotation guy, and you're going to give him the innings that he needs. And that's what the Cubs are doing with Kyle Hendricks. He's their best chance at having a homegrown guy to be a top of the rotation guy, and they are giving him either a 4th or 5th spot in the starting rotation. But the Cubs, the White Sox, instead of doing that with Eric Johnson, they're going to stick with John Danks, and they're going to ride Matt Latos. Now, Matt Latos is a guy who a couple years ago was a really, really good pitcher, and he's just been injury-riddled. You don't know what you're going to get. He didn't have good numbers in spring training, but like I said, I don't care about spring training numbers. Let's see what you do in the regular season. But we don't know what we're going to get out of him. So if you're the White Sox, you feel comfortable with Chris Sale. You feel comfortable with Carlos Rodon. You feel comfortable, with Quintana. But what about What about Latos? What about Danks? Do you feel comfortable with either of those guys? Who's your leadoff hitter? Do you have enough power on your team? What about a power left-handed bat? You never went out and got that. Like I said, is Rodon going to improve on his pitch control? If Latos comes out there and just absolutely blows up, and John Danks has a bad season like last year, what do you do? Do you have another guy? The Cubs have two other guys. They have Adam Warren and they have Travis Wood. Both of those guys could step up and be the bottom of your rotation guys if absolutely need to, and play reasonably well. If you're the White Sox and Latos and Danks don't play well or are injured or whatever, you've got Eric Johnson. What else do you have? Who else are you going to put there? Those are all questions. Do I think the White Sox are going to be bad this year? No, I think they're going to be much better than last year, but they have so many question marks, and I don't know if they have enough answers. They have a lot more questions than the Cubs, and the number of questions doesn't necessarily correlate to how you'll perform in the season, but if they have a lot more things that they need to answer than the Cubs. And I went through, I took the steamer projections of every player in the starting rotation, or the starting players for the Cubs and the White Sox. And I kind of wanted to talk about those a little bit and how I see those into projecting what the Cubs and the Sox will do this year. If you look at Rizzo, they have him projected to be hits 278 with 32 home runs and 98 RBIs. Bryant 269 with 95 RBIs. Schwarber 258 with 25 home runs and 74 RBIs. They don't have the Cubs players anywhere particularly too far off of what they were last year, but they predict a lot of solid numbers for the Cubs, especially with the on-base percentage. Rizzo 373, Bryant 358, Hayward 357, 347 for Fowler, 352 for Zobrist, 322 for Soler. Those are nice numbers, and if those are your starting lineup is everybody's well over a 300 on-base percentage, that's projecting you to being a really good team. Reigning philosophy with the Cubs brass is if you want to be a potential to win the World Series, what you need to do is you need to have every single position have a WAR that's a positive. And if you look at what the projected WAR is, Rizzo, you're at 5.1, 5.6 for Bryant, 2.3 for Schwarber, 5 for Hayward, 1.6 for Fowler, 2.8 for Zobrist, 2.5 for Russell, 1.6 for Montero. Other than Montero, you're at over a 2 for every single position. You look at that starting pitching rotation. Arrieta, you got a 5.2 WAR. Lester, a 4.3, 2.6 for Lackey, 1.8 for Hamill, and 2.0 for Hendricks. If those WARs come true, you're looking at a really, really, really good team. If you look over to the Southsiders, and I guess with the Cubs is, the question marks you have on this team are, what's the bullpen going to do? Is Arrieta's arm going to hold up? What are you going to get out of Lackey? And are you able to cut out on the number of strikeouts that you had last year? Even though you had great on-base percentage, you had way too many strikeouts for my liking. Looking over at the White Sox is you have another great season projected for Jose Abreu, 3.7 WAR for him, 1.3 for Lowry, 3.2 for Frazier, 1.0 for Rollins, 1.3 for Avila, Austin Jackson at 1.2, Eaton 1.7, Melky Cabrera 0.8, and Avi Garcia, they have it a minus 0.7, so they say he's worse than a replacement. And Chris Sale, you're up at 6.0. They project a 15-9 season with a 2.79 ERA for him, and a 6 WAR, which is absolutely fantastic. Quintana 3.5, Rodon 2.3, Latos 1.8, and Danks 0.8. So if you look at the Cubs brass version of what they think you need is this White Sox team is not a playoff team or a contending team because of Avi Garcia is not going to bring you a good WAR. John Danks and Matt Latos are not bringing you good WAR. There's still question marks in that roster. So then I guess that leads me to one last thing in this episode is what are my predictions for the playoff teams and who's going to win the division. American League, I'm going to go with Toronto winning the division. I think that's my pick. The AL Central, that's a tough one to pick. I think there's no great teams this year, but it's going to be a lot of competitive teams. I'm going to go with Detroit winning this year. And in the AL West, it's hard to go against Texas, so I'm going to go Texas. And my two wild cards are going to be, I'm going to say Houston and Kansas City. In the National League, in the East, you got to go with the Mets. They're a fantastic team. With the Central, I'm going to sound a little homerish, but I'm going to go with the Cubs. And in the West, I'm going to go with the Giants. I think they're going to win it. And it's going to be a dogfight again for the wild card. And I'm going to say it's the Washington Nationals and the St. Louis Cardinals. So that's my predictions with that baseball for the final season. So that's going to do it for this episode of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. When we talk next week, we'll talk about what we see in the first week of Major League season. We'll talk about the playoff run for the Blackhawks and what who they'll be facing in the first round. We will talk about the edge rushers in the NFL draft, and we'll have another mock draft. Thank you guys so much for listening. Please make sure you check out Twitter at Swerski Sports, Facebook.com/Swerski Sports, and our website, SwerskiSports.com. Subscribe to us on YouTube if you listen that way, or on Stitcher or iTunes, however you listen. Make sure you subscribe, pass it on to friends, and thank you guys so much for listening. Until next time, bear down.
Cubs win! What a lucky break! The good Lord wants the Cubs to win!
We thank Dick and God for all they have provided.
Cubs win! Cubs win! Cubs win!
Oh, I don't want her, you can have her, she's a Packer fan. She can't fit in my van.
And she looks like Remember, New Yorkers, smoking crack is not legal on the plains. Bears 31 to -7. The Bears!
Oh, when the Bears go bearing down